I think this was a big win for Trump, a big win for Mike Johnson, and I think Schumer is eating crow with his base right now, and it's kind of it's speaking to the fact that Democrats do not have a unified strategy. They do not have a unified message. They are still floundering with the results of the election last year.
Hello, and welcome to Restoring America, a project of the Washington Examiner. I'm Tom Rogan, joined by my colleague Jeremiah Poff. Welcome, Jeremiah. Please make sure to subscribe and like wherever you're watching this, but let's get into it. Jeremiah, the showdown between President Trump, Republicans, and Chuck Schumer and his Democrats. Thoughts?
Usually, when you want to bluff on something, you got to have something to bluff with. And Chuck Schumer learned the hard way that that he didn't have anything to bluff with. So I think this was a big win for Speaker Mike Johnson and President Trump early in the administration. They got the government funded in the way that they wanted, and they rammed it down the throats of the Democrats in the Senate, who provided the 8 or so votes that they needed to get it passed there. Because you had to take a step back here to see how this happened. But the main thing is that the Democrats were expecting that Johnson and Trump were not going to be able to get the votes passed in the House to pass this controversial continuing resolution that basically funded the government through the end of the fiscal year. And they were happy to sit back on their hands and watch the whole thing because they were like, oh, Republicans never agree on things. But this time they did. And the bill passed the House on a party line vote, and then all of a sudden,
right,
Chuck Schumer was stuck there trying to figure out what to do because now he lost all leverage that he had. So I think this was a big win for Trump, a big win for Mike Johnson, and I think Schumer is eating crow with his base right now, and it's kind of it's speaking to the fact that Democrats do not have a unified strategy. They do not have a unified message. They are still floundering with the results of the election last year, and they have not been able to confront the machine that is the Trump administration in any coherent fashion.
What do you think would have happened if Schumer had refused to, sign on to the bill?
Well, if they would have shut the government
right
down, and I think the Trump administration was perfectly content with letting them do that,
and that Schumer feared that Democrats would be blamed.
Right, and they would have been, because at this point the Republicans had passed a bill on a party line vote. They were bringing the bill up in the Senate. The only way the bill wouldn't pass was if Democrats blocked it on the filibuster. They didn't vote for it when it came after the filibuster. So on the up or down vote, it's only Republican support. But I think Angus King, and there was one Democrat from New Hampshire that voted for it. But by and large, it was a party line vote to fund the government after the filibuster.
Right.
But that's kind of the thing, is if they had shut the government down, and I think Schumer, to his credit, recognized that for his party it probably would have been worse to shut the government down, because Russ Vought, the director of the Office of Management and Budget, who knows how the bureaucracy works, was going to get to decide which agencies stayed open, which agencies closed, who of the federal workforce was considered essential and who was not essential.
Right.
And in theory, he could have said, oh, all the workers in New York and in California, they're all non-essential. We're going to shut all those programs down, but all the programs in Texas and Florida and all the Republican-controlled states, we're going to keep those up, and basically punished Democrats. I mean, not to say that he was going to do this. And I think Schumer, to his credit, kind of recognized that this was the lose-lose for his party, right? So he's going to say, okay, I'm going to eat crow on this because I messed up at the beginning and assumed that the Republicans were going to pass a bill. We're not going to be able to pass a bill on their own. And I think that's a big part of the miscalculation for the Democrats.
And Mike Johnson, as you say, I think really is the big winner here, right? He has shown an ability which has eluded previous Republican speakers, certainly in the near-term memory, to be able to, get it across the board with probably a lot of Trump phone calls.
Well, I think that's the key difference here, is that I think if Mike Johnson was doing this on his own with, say, Nikki Haley as president, this would never have happened this way.
Right.
He would, Trump, is the face of the party. He is the energy of the party. And so what he's able to do is bring a lot of people on board with things that maybe they otherwise wouldn't have voted for. Right. And I think that's, Trump even did this with Johnson becoming speaker. He basically saved his job.
Right.
So to add this on to the funding bill, I think Trump has an agenda. He wants it passed, and he's not going to he's going to bring you in
Right.
to make sure that you're on board with his agenda, which is also the Republican agenda.
Right.
And so you'll have outliers like Rand Paul and Thomas Massie who are going to be their own crying voice in the wind, but that's all that they're going to be, because you can lose one vote or two.
Right. Right.
Not more than that in
Right.
this Congress.
Right.
But
Yeah.
that's, I think, that the big miscalculation for the Democrats right now was thinking that they could do this, that the Republicans weren't going to be able to do it without them.
Right.
And we'll see what happens going forward. I think that this is a big thing for the Democrats going forward, because the fact that Trump was able to get them to cave on this issue sets the stage for them, forcing them to cave next for the appropriations bills for next fiscal year.
Right.
And that could have big ramifications for how the government is funded, especially after the DOGE cuts are kind of more well known. A more aggressive agenda in terms of what's going to be in the budget is kind of laid out. Will be interesting to see how that plays out.
And the other big issue this week has been the Putin-Trump phone call. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm going to ask you about this in a second, but to me, honestly, like, it just doesn't seem like much has moved on this. Like, Trump, also was talking to Zelensky this week, so it seems like there's talk of a ceasefire, but I don't know. I think that there's still kind of a lot of feeling each other out from all three sides in this. Trump trying to play this like straight by the middle, directly by the middle, like, I'm going to mediate this peace. And then obviously Zelensky and Putin have their own agendas and goals in this as well. It still feels to me that it's too early to really like come up with a conclusion on it.
I think you're right about the conclusion. My concern, though, is that where you have the president putting so much pressure on Ukraine in terms of, we're going to suspend intelligence sharing, military aid, you're chucked out of the White House, which again, Zelensky shares blame for that incident. The cost for recovering that aid, etc., was Zelensky's agreement to a full 30-day ceasefire, and then Trump does the phone call with Putin, and suddenly the 30-day ceasefire is only energy and certain infrastructure, or energy, and it seems unfair. I think it undermines Trump's credibility as an impartial arbiter. I also think problematically it suggests Trump is too willing to put faith in Putin. That he trusts Putin on the phone when they talk for an hour and a half, and Putin says, this is the way we can get it done, where clearly I think Putin's agenda here is to drag this out, undermine Trump's credibility. So I'm more skeptical. Yeah,
I think there's I do think that there's something to be said for the fact that Trump has clearly had much more dealings with Zelensky and is already more, and he knows that Zelensky really tied himself close to Joe Biden, and even campaigned for Kamala Harris.
It's true.
And I think so. I think Trump's instinct is more to distrust Zelensky.
Mm-hmm.
The bad thing for Zelensky is that it means that he's more likely to now trust Putin, and I at the same time, Trump he's very transactional in the whole thing. So I don't really see him saying, Putin's this, going to be this great guy and Zelensky's going to be this terrible person, because they're not being transactional.
But the transactional element, right, is for Ukraine, you've got to do 30 days full ceasefire, and for Putin, suddenly it's just the energy stuff.
Right.
And to me, that because I agree with you, that's my hope with Trump, is that when we get to the nuts and the bolts, and you're right, that we can't draw conclusions yet, Trump is going to say to Putin, where are the nuts and bolts? You're giving me a lot of rhetoric and promises, but where are the nuts and bolts? And, maybe you're right, this is just a first step, and it's a building, in Trump's mind, more of a relationship. But yeah, it is problematic. And again, you are right about that, though. We do have
People forget that Trump and Zelensky's bitterness actually goes back to his first term.
Right. Right.
The whole first impeachment in the first administration was over a call with Zelensky.
Right.
So I think I think Trump's also not one to hold. He can hold a grudge if he wants to, but he'll also welcome you right back into the fold.
Right, and I think you're right. Look, Zelensky clearly has to, next time they meet, be far more deferential. I think it sort of speaks to character flaws on the part of President Trump. He requires this sort of pageantry of deference, but Zelensky needs America's support. He was arrogant in the Oval Office meeting in a way that was so, idiotic, considering what we know about President Trump, and frankly, a lot of allies have complained about Ukraine not being grateful enough for aid.
Even Joe Biden complained about it.
And you are right about that, which the media likes to ignore. You are 100% right that Zelensky campaigned for Kamala Harris. And I remember, in the October when the Pennsylvania plant was obvious campaigning, I read a piece at the time saying, what the profanity is going on? Must the ambassador be saying, "Oh, we're working for Putin"? Because it was such an arrogant, stupid decision that the mind boggles. So, I mean, Zelensky has repair work to do here. At the ultimate level, my view is that, I think, obviously you need to debate these issues, but I think that the evidence judged fairly would suggest Russia's invasion is not really about NATO and 2014, which they say was a Western coup, which I think is BS. But that it's an imperial venture that should be riposted, and Ukraine is on the right side. Hopefully, though, we can get to a meaningful deal, which means this doesn't happen 10 or 20 years down the road again, which is a deal, frankly, I think Ukraine would accept with giving up.
I think it's really interesting that Trump is also dangling a whole bunch of economic investment to Russia. And one of the first things they did when they met was like, we're going to staff up both embassies again, which hadn't been done in, I think, a decade.
Yeah. Well, because the Russians, literally half of their diplomats are about 40% are spies.
Well, I'm sure that
and they don't do very nice things. If I end up hanging from a lamppost somewhere on my bedroom with some weird sex game gone wrong, that's the Russians. Okay?
Banned from Russia, Tom Rogan.
Banned from Russia. I'm a terrorist arrest warrant. But look, I mean, diplomacy is important. So if that can work, and the FBI has enough resources, which hopefully Kash Patel will give them to follow the naughty Russians around Washington, that's positive. One thing I do find slightly strange about the investment in Russia is that, or that President Trump's agenda with that is, what American energy executives, because that would be the key area of investment, are going to want to jump into bed with the Russians. Because if you get on the wrong side of the wrong Russian, and there are a lot of those in the Russian energy infrastructure, you have a tendency to fly out of a window into a swimming pool drowning and having your family dead. There are a lot of risks attenuated.
There have been American companies that have invested.
There have, but a while ago, and it's a dangerous game. A lot of money, but
yeah.
But what happens if a future Democratic administration comes in and puts sanctions back on as well? There's a lot. I'm just saying, there's complexity here that. Yeah.
Right, but that's, I think, part of the reason why it's so important that Trump's doing this at the beginning of his term, because if he's able to secure this peace before the end of August, let's say, if he's able to do that and then start to have this rapprochement with Russia that that includes massive economic investments in both countries, I think it's going to allow Trump to push most of his focus back on China, which is ultimately what I think he really wants to do.
Of course, then the more you get in with the Russians, the more you dissect the relationship with the Europeans, which is about 600 times more trade value for us. So
I also think, though, that he's betting on the fact that the Europeans can't get through life without the Americans.
Well, I mean, we will see. They're putting a lot of money in defense now. I mean, as you said, though, I like what you said in one of the previous shows, that Trump in the early stages is just sort of firing on all cylinders to see what lies, and so it's too early to draw that conclusion.
Right. I mean, we could be sitting here 2 years from now, and the geopolitical landscape could be completely
different.
And
it probably will be. It probably will be. So that's probably it for this week, right?
Yeah. Tom, always good to see you.
Thank you.
Please be sure to like and subscribe on YouTube or wherever else you're watching, and be sure to check out our content on washingtonexaminer.com. Until next time, I'm Jeremiah Poff.
Tom Rogan.
With Tom Rogan, and we will see you again.